Hello, beautiful people. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's Aaron Lind with Aaron Lind Real Estate Services here. Time for your monthly market update for May 2026. So, what's the spring market been doing? We were off to a bit of a slow start in March, but April definitely saw things ramp up, not necessarily in terms of sales, definitely not in terms of prices, but just in terms of volume. Now, the first number I want to throw out at you is a little abstract and hard to wrap your head around, but I'll give you some context. At the end of April, there were about 3,700 listings in the Victoria real estate market, kind of the Greater Victoria area. A lot of realtors I know that are sort of more liberal on this number would draw the line at 3,000 between a balanced market and a buyer's market. Some of the more conservative realtors I know would probably put that number at about 3,500, where it shifts from a balanced to a buyer's market. A lot of people are still using the language of balanced market. I think we're in a buyer's market, and I think that there's lots of opportunities at the high end for sure, and even at the low end to exercise some downward pressure on asking prices and get some pretty good deals if you're brave enough to enter the realm, given everything that's going on. There's obviously a lot of international uncertainty. There's a lot of kind of fear around the Canadian economy and everything that's happening with the States. All that being said, that means that there's a lot less competition than there otherwise would be, and people who are otherwise highly motivated may only be somewhat motivated. And so if you find a good property and the numbers work, you're going to be facing less competition. I'm not saying jump into every single deal. I'm just saying this is definitely a time for buyers to consider their options a little more seriously and a little less fearfully than maybe some of their cohorts, because you'd be surprised at the kind of deals that I'm seeing happen and the kinds of negotiations that I'm involved in, especially over the last month. What do the numbers look like? We've got 3,700 active listings. What does that mean in terms of what's coming to market and what's selling? So how does 3,700 listings compare to where we've been in past months or the past year? They're up about 8% from last month, but up about 14% from last year. Now that's a big number, that 14%. I think it's more indicative of where we're at in the cycle of the year rather than what the broader market is doing, because all of these new listings aren't necessarily resulting in new sales. In fact, last month we had 643 sales. The year before we had 642. So they're basically dead even year to year, but we had far more listings this year than we did last year. So only about 17% of listings actually sold last month. That's not a terribly impressive number. That's reason for sellers to really think about the way they're positioning their property, and a good opportunity for buyers to say, most of these things aren't moving. Maybe we're a little shy to make a lowball offer, but if 4 out of 5 things aren't selling, take a shot. You never know. So we've looked at volume. Now let's look at prices. Homes and condos are actually down about 1% year over year. So they're either holding steady or slowly but surely trending downwards. In terms of volume, what's really shocking is houses and townhouses are both down about 1% year over year, and condos are up about 6%. Didn't expect that, given that condos have had a pretty rough run over the last several months. I didn't expect them to be kind of the saving grace, the numbers last month. But I think it's a sign that that people, especially at the entry level, that would have thought things were beyond their purchasing power in the past, are starting to make some lowball offers that get some traction, or we're seeing things that used to be, 600,000 become 500,000 or 550 maybe, and that just opens up opportunities that didn't exist before, especially the higher end bracket for condos. I was actually involved in a deal last month with a condo that sold last year for about 850 and sold this year for 725. Now that's obviously a huge drop. There were some other mitigating factors in that. It wasn't a total loss for the seller. I can't get into too many details, but it just gives you an idea of how much the pendulum has swung in a very short amount of time. If you want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into this, I just did another video about whether or not Victoria is worth buying in 2026. It looks at it from a personal standpoint and from an investment standpoint. So if you're curious to take a bit of a deeper dive into how far your money gets you at this time of year in this market, please check out that video, and it might give you just a little bit more food for thought. That's all for today. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.